Hi everybody, I'm Tim from troutandfeather.com, and in this video we are going to discuss and learn how to tie the sucker spawn. This is one of the flies that nearly killed fly fishing for me. Now I say that in complete jest because I had released a video prior to this one with that title, and it generated just a bunch of discussion, just a ton of video views. But what I learned was that people came into that video not just because of the title, they wanted to learn how to tie the sucker spawn. So here it is. Stay tuned. Here is our fly of the day. This is the one I'll be featuring throughout the video. This is called a sucker spawn. Basically looks like a fly that's having a really bad hair day, and that's kind of what's going on. We'll talk about the material that we use to achieve this look, and if you stick around to the very end of the tying procedures, I will share basically one of my absolute favorite sucker spawn variations. This is a killer pattern. It's tied on a scud hook, at least this one. You'll have to stick around to figure out my other one. But with that said, let's get this fly with that bad hair day out of my vise and get a clean hook and start tying. In my Stonfo Cayman vise, grab your favorite scud hook. This is one that's right now size 14. This is called a 1 extra strong, 1 extra short hook. What that basically means by 1 extra strong, the metal in this hook is just a tad heavier than a standard size hook. And then for that 1 extra short, that short basically means, imagine if we had this hook eye and it was just moved back 1 hook eye. Now be careful because we're basing this on standard dimensions, and amongst hook companies, even models within their own brands, sometimes nothing is standard. So just kind of take that kind of with a grain of salt. So grab your favorite scud hook. Next, grab some thread. This is some 12-aught Semperfli Nano Silk. The color is red. What I love about this Nano Silk is this stuff is tough. This is called a GSP thread, a gel spun polyethylene, and it is extremely, extremely tough to break. Now with that said, I'll probably snap it off whenever I'm tying this fly, but what I like to do is just lock this in place behind the thread eye, go back a few wraps, then I grab a pair of scissors, I'm going to trim off my tag end of thread, but make sure you hold this under tension when trimming away. It's very difficult to do otherwise. Now at this point, I'm just going to go down the base of the hook, almost with touching wraps. You can see with this thread, it lays relatively flat, smooths out pretty nice. I'm going to go a little bit past to the point where the bend would be on this hook. This is a barbless hook, and that is something I prefer. Now, before we get into our main material, let me pause here and let's talk about a couple different things. Number one, you're going to notice there is no bead on this hook. Can you add a bead? Absolutely. Maybe something like this is Honic. This is their typical Eco Plus beads. So this is not a slotted bead because this is just a standard size or standard eye hook. If you were going to go with a jig nymph, then you would go with something like slotted. Tungsten, brass, it is completely up to you. Hold on until the end. I'll be sharing a special one with you. You can kind of guess where that's going. And then finally, before I add the main material, could you add a little bit of super glue over the base just to secure it? Sure, you can. Have I ever? No, I haven't really ever felt the need for that. I tend to just add super glue at the very end as I'm finishing the fly. All right, well, let's get on to the main part of this fly. Our main body material is this really cool yarn called Angora yarn. You can just see that there's just like fibers coming all over the place. It's extremely soft. This stuff is just really cool to work with. Now, whenever you snip off a section, I'm going to recommend you snip off a section around 6 inches, maybe a hair shorter, maybe a hair longer, depending on how many of these little bubbles, in a sense, you're going to have on your pattern. But don't just start tying it in like that, because you'll realize, typically in this Angora that I have, there are 3 strands. So you want to separate those strands, then you want to take your time and pull them apart, and I basically unwind with my right hand as I separate them with the fingers of my left and right hand. So I'm kind of untwisting, unstranding, trying to get some leverage and work my way down. If you take your time, it will take about a minute and you'll have the entire piece unstranded. If you get in a rush and you start pulling, you'll notice that this stuff kind of tears easily and it will just pull apart at the very end and it will not be 6 inches, which is kind of what you're going for. So I have a piece here that I've already unstranded. It's ready to go. If you look at the end of it, it looks a little frayed there, so I'm just going to grab some scissors, trim that, just moisten it slightly, and it's ready to be tied in. So I'm going to tie this piece in, and I basically want it to rest about halfway down the shank, somewhere around there. We're going to be winding over it. I'm going to wind over it right now, though, just to get everything locked in place. Then I'll wind back, and it's okay if we're not exactly touching. And now we're going to start making these cool little noodles in a sense. Now the height of them is completely up to you, and you'll start to figure out my height is basically the same distance high as the gap of the hook. So that's about the approximate height that I'm going to go with these. So I'm just going to kind of bend a loop, hold it in place with my left hand, pinch wrap with my right hand, make sure everything's good, get 2 more wraps in there with my thread, 1, 2, and then continue on. Let's put another one in. So we'll get a couple of these in, then we'll talk about what we're doing. Pinch wrap, 1, 2, looking good so far. Now the couple little tips that I have for you as I'm going to start winding forward. Be careful, you want to try to keep your thread wraps stacked on top of each other. If you do that, if you keep them nice and uniform, then your thread won't creep forward, because if it creeps forward, then your loops are going to be spread out. Now there are some ways that you can kind of adjust for that. And you'll notice as I continue moving forward, occasionally I'll take a loop and I'll tie it more leaning on your side of the hook. Then I'll put the next one on my side of the hook. Does it make a difference? I like to think so. I like to have mine a little bit more compact, and I like to get a number of those in there just because it will, at least in my sense, it really just gives on this translucency once this pattern is wet. Now, have I seen people that just have like 6 big loops across the top? Absolutely. Does it work for them? Sure. So this is really just one of those patterns that you have to decide how you want it to look. There's no sucker spawn police out there saying it has to look like this. Right now I've been basically stacking them just on top of each other. I'm going to put this one a little bit more, leaning a little bit back on my side. So it's almost going to double up. And this next one I'm going to kind of lean it a little bit more on your side, on the camera. Now, if you are tying along at home, you're going to start to notice that long 6-inch piece of Angora yarn is no longer. And there are times you're going to get halfway through the fly and say, oh no, I'm going to run out. That's okay. Just snip it, add on another piece, and continue on. I have a bunch of small pieces that I put together, sometimes different colors as well. All right, we're getting a little bit closer. I'm going to try to get a couple more in here at the very end. And really just try to jam these up against the eye. Let's see, I might be able to squeeze one more in there. I'll make this one just a little bit smaller so it's almost tapering towards the end. Yeah, I think I can get that one in there. All right, so I got one more in there. To kind of finish this off, I'm just going to pull back a little bit, just get a couple little wraps in there for now. And then I'm going to try to see if I can almost create a little bit of a thread dam in there, just to force that last piece up. I'm going to grab my scissors. These are my renowned fly tire super cuts. Love these. Just got to try to get that in there as tight as possible. Trim away. Now let's take a look at the overall fly. You can see just from me moving my fingers across it, it's already pulling these fibers out. So cool. Such a really cool material. Everything's looking good. So I'm just going to build up the head just a hair. I'm going to moisten my fingers just to help keep everything in place. I love using this red thread. I just feel like it gives this fly just an added little piece. All right, once I have everything about ready to go, I'll set my thread straight down. I'm going to grab a little bit of super glue. I'm using some Zap-A-Gap. What's nice about this one is that it is brushable. So I can simply take it, place a little bit of super glue along my thread, put the cap back on, and go right into my whip finish. I'm going to go for around 4 to 6 turns since I have super glue. And that looks about perfect right there. Try to keep that thread up top. Let's get in there. I'm going to pull my GSP tight. Now I'm not sure if I got any of that super glue in the eye of the hook. Just in case, I'm going to take my take a bodkin, just going to push it in there, put my finger underneath just to remove any of that adhesive if it is in there. And there is my finished sucker spawn. Not much to this. You can see how long it took me to tie this one. Probably a little bit longer since I was talking to all of you out there. I've been known to talk a little bit, but now let's just take a quick peek at this fly. You can see it from the top, from your angle, from the bottom. We have all of that red through, and we have kind of a little contrasting pink through it, which, by the way, this was light pink sucker spawn. And there's kind of a finished look at the fly. A couple little things, as I mentioned before, you can see all these little loops. They're kind of jammed up against each other. I really have mine bunched up in there. Their height, maybe a little bit taller than the gap of the hook. So I was saying I keep it to about the gap, maybe a little bit more, but you can see why. Once you have those locked in place, all of these excess fibers are just flowing all over the place, which when this gets wet, you can just imagine how they all kind of scoop back and it creates like this translucency around this sucker spawn. So light pink, easily one of my favorite colors. I may talk about this again later, but some other really cool colors I love. This orange, there's a lime green. Those are from a place in Pennsylvania called Foley's End. And then I have one more color that I especially love. It is black. This one, I have no idea how old this package is, from Dan Bailey's out in Montana. And I will share with you right now one of my favorite sucker spawn flies. So if you're getting ready to take a picture, you may want to grab your cell phone right now. Take a picture of this one. This is one that I have not posted on social media. I'm not sure if it's ever going to go on social media. So this is a black sucker spawn. So it's with that black Angora, a matte black bead, and then that same Semperfli 12-aught nano silk thread. Hopefully that is showing up okay. Let me put some of this pink behind it just to create a little contrast for the video. Hopefully that is showing up really well. But I think you've seen that one long enough. That one's going back into hiding. And as I'm putting this pink one back in, I will just mention, I definitely like to use slotted tungsten beads and jig hooks, especially in smaller sizes. We're talking 16 down to size 20. Whenever I'm fishing larger sizes, we're talking size 10, 12, 14. This is a size 14, as I mentioned. I like to fish them just as is or with a tungsten bead at the top. Do I use jig hooks in all sizes? Sure, occasionally. There's just something very, I don't know, I'm not going to call this necessarily traditional, though this is a bit of an older pattern compared to many of the modern ones. But this has just been a go-to for me for many years. Let's change the camera angle and talk a little bit more about this from, again, a little bit more tying and more from a fly fishing perspective. Before we go back and talk about the tying and even the fishing perspective on this one, let's first just talk about sucker spawn. What is it? So it's as simple as the name sounds. We're talking about a clutch of fish eggs that really come from a sucker. Now in my home state of Pennsylvania, suckers can be absolutely prolific depending on the streams that we're talking about. They are found in a bunch of waterways and, like all fish, they spawn. From that, this fly has originated, and I can't tell you exactly who created this one, but I know that at least in central Pennsylvania, it's been around since, geez, the 60s and maybe prior to that. Now, how did I learn about it? It wasn't because I was fishing streams that had a prolific amount of suckers in them and it was after the spawn, so it was a match the hatch opportunity. It wasn't. For me, I learned about this fly whenever I first got interested in fly fishing for steelhead up in western Pennsylvania, what we call Steelhead Alley. So my first experience with the sucker spawn, it just revolved around these really just interesting flies tied from that Angora yarn in just really almost high-vis colors. We're talking like bright pinks, bright yellows, fluorescent orange. That was my first experience with the sucker spawn, as you kind of seeing me tie it today. But now let's just kind of talk about more of those tying perspectives on it, and then we'll get into the notion of fishing with this fly. Tying the sucker spawn. Geez, as you noticed, it was a pretty simple pattern. It's relatively straightforward. Now I shared the notion of a scud hook using a heavy wire hook, a jig hook, adding weight to it. There are tons of options. Yeah, can you add other materials besides that Angora yarn? Go for it. There are lots of different types of yarn out there. I can tell you some of my early experiences with the sucker spawn. I mean, it was with just relatively cheap yarn that I found in a fabric store. It worked fine. But then as I started to fish Angora yarn, there's just something about it that just gives it this translucency in the water, and it just looks almost lifelike. I'm not saying there aren't other yarns out there that can do that, but I know Angora yarn can, without a doubt, start there and then branch out into some other ones. I believe I have some links down below if you're looking for Angora yarn. What about the colors? I mean, I talked about in Erie, we're thinking about, geez, these high-vis colors. But the one that I shared was a pale pink, and I shared that other secret color. If you missed it, go back and watch. However, whenever I think about just the actual sucker spawn, we're talking about more muted colors. I believe even like a light goldish, almost a brownish color that it's known for. Now, if you do a quick Google search on sucker spawn, you will find just a plethora of colors. And I'm not saying it's going to depend on the species that you're fishing for, but geez, figure out a color that works really well in your waterways and then tie this fly up to kind of match it in a sense. See how that color works for you. The notion of fly fishing with sucker spawn is, gosh, something I really didn't overthink at least 20 years ago. Whenever I was fishing it, I would typically have two of them tied on, relatively stout leader and tippet. I would have one kind of tied to the other one, and I made sure that I was getting it really down deep because I was fishing for steelhead. They tended to be relatively spooky, and I wanted lots of split shot to just have these kind of just bouncing really slow along the bottom to give those fish lots of time to see them. I still do prefer them to be relatively close to the bottom, hence the notion of a jig hook with a slotted tungsten bead. The reason I really like jig hooks is because they tend to invert your fly in the water, and it helps to ride hook point up so you won't necessarily snag stuff along the bottom. However, whenever you're fly fishing for steelhead, there are times when you'll have steelhead that will just be kind of clustered up. And then imagine you have all these fish clustered up, you're making casts, and you know you're getting them right in front of the fish and underneath the fish, and you can snag them. So kind of keep that in mind that whenever I have steelhead and I know I have a lot of fish in a pod, then I will go to more of that scud hook so I know I'm not going to be just scraping the hook point along the bottom. That's not what we're trying to do with steelhead. But in other situations, we're talking about trout. Geez, by all means, go for those jig hooks because that's going to really enhance your ability to fish. I know what you're going to say, and somebody, before anybody posts a comment down below, but the fly is going to be upside down and that sucker spawn, that Angora yarn is going to be running upside down. It is, but trust me, it's not going to be like that 100% of the drift. And even if it was, the fish will not care. They'll still eat it. Trust me. Now, I like to use this for both wild trout and for stockfish, and there are tons of other species out there that you can use it for. Does it have to just be in waterways that have a prolific white sucker, we'll say, amount of fish? No, it doesn't have to be that. It could be in waterways all around the world. There's just something about this fly. When it gets wet, it gets translucent. It almost looks just kind of lifelike in a sense. And it just looks like something fish feed on. And they will feed on this fly too. Now, for my current setup, I love to Euro nymph. That's the rabbit hole I've just recently jumped down into. And by recent, we're talking over the last few years. If you look down below in the description of this video, you'll see some of my kind of preferred setups, my favorite rod, reel, lines, and all of that fun stuff. And you can always shoot me an email if you have any specific Euro nymphing questions. But by all means, use this on a Euro nymphing setup because it works out so well. But when you're using it, I would kind of pair that with something a little bit heavier. So maybe you're going to have a heavy waltz worm as your point fly, and then you'll have a sucker spawn, maybe a smaller one, as a dropper. That can be an absolutely deadly setup on spring creeks all around the world, especially in central Pennsylvania. Well, if there's any other techniques and any other styles that you prefer to fly fish with the sucker spawn, by all means, leave them down below in the comment section because I know we can all learn from each other throughout this process. Thank you so much for watching this sucker spawn video. Such a fun one, but if you'd like to watch more like it, you can check out my website, which is troutandfeather.com. I have nearly 300 videos over there, and I guarantee you can find one to connect with, and hopefully it's not related to a fly that killed fly fishing for you, as this one almost did for me, which, by the way, I will put a link to that video down below in the description as well. If you're into social media, you can find Trout and Feather on Instagram, Facebook, and I'm now experimenting with Twitter. It's going well for the most part, but I'd love to connect with you on one of those social platforms. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave them down below in the comments section, or you can email me at tcammisa@gmail.com. Thank you everybody for all of the subscribes, for the likes, for all that fun stuff with YouTube. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing many of you soon.